Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man. He'll unpack wisdom and insights from a cross-section of top quality performers in business, media, sports, entertainment, and lifestyle to uncover key elements to help you live your best audacious life ever. So without further ado, here is the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations, I'm Audley Stevenson, and thank you for joining us on another edition of the Audacious Living Podcast. Hands down, this is the most audacious podcast you'll find on the internet, and I want to take this opportunity to thank you for joining us on this journey as we continue our ongoing goal of helping you live your best audacious life ever. As always, I would encourage you to connect with us through our social media channels. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram under the handle The Audacious Pod. And then if you head over to Facebook and you type in The Audacious Living Podcast in the search engine, you'll find us there as well, and you can join that community. And then, of course, if you're watching on YouTube, then you know if you tap the notification bell down below, you'll be instantly subscribed to our YouTube channel. So please like, follow, subscribe, share, and let's keep connected, and let's keep this conversation going. I got to take a really quick moment here and thank all those amazing people that reached out to me for my birthday this past week. It was really awesome to hear from you with the messages, the phone calls, the DMs, all of it. It was all great stuff. Thank you for connecting with me and making this birthday extra special. Now, the key word for this podcast is actually connection on this episode, similar to like I talked about the connections I had on my birthday, but we're going to talk about connection from a leadership context. And if you think about, there's so much things that leaders are expected to do in terms of leading and guiding an organization, making sure everything's run smoothly, taking that time to deliberately connect isn't necessarily at the top of the to-do list for most leaders, but there's tremendous value if they're able to, especially from an organizational standpoint, if they can find that time to make that connection. And it's important for leaders. Karen Hardwick is our guest on this week's episode of the Audacious Living Podcast, and she'll help us explore this topic much further, as well as increase our awareness and understanding around the difference being a connected leaders can have on the masses, if you will. Karen is a psychotherapist turned leadership consultant with a master's in divinity who transformed lives by blending psychology and spirituality with leadership. She's got a new book out. It's called The Connected Leader. So this is right up her alley. And this is where in her book, she shows humans how to grow emotionally and spiritually using 7 strategies of connection to become the best audacious version of themselves. And so it's a great conversation, lots of great learnings. I really think you're going to enjoy hearing about those 7 connection strategies because they are useful, they're practical, and I think they can benefit all of us. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with Karen Hardwick. Enjoy. That's fine?
Sounds good.
Oh, good. Well, I'm really glad, first off, that you're here to chat with you, specifically about your book, The Connected Leader, 7 Strategies to Empower Your True Self and Inspire Others. It's a big title, and it says a lot.
Yeah, it does, for sure. It does. And we went back and forth on the title, but we landed on this because we thought that it appealed to a wide audience, like parents, relationship people, and also leaders at work.
Got you. Yep. Absolutely. Interestingly, because the one thing, even what the title says to me, and as I read it and gone through the book, the one thing it certainly says to me is that a big piece of leadership, or especially the effective leaders, are those that are grounded within themselves first before they can have an impact on other people. Is that a fair way of putting it?
You just nailed it, Audley. Really, because here's what I have seen over the many moons that I've been doing this leadership work.
Mm-hmm.
Leadership is really not about title or position, salary or paycheck, or how many people report to you. Mm-hmm. Leadership is the ability to inspire people to be their best selves.
Yeah.
And that happens whether we're leading a global enterprise or if we're around the family kitchen table leading our family of 5.
Right.
How are we creating a safe psychological space for the people entrusted to our care? Right. And unless, as you said, unless we know how to connect deeply to our true self,
right,
we can't lead or connect to others in healthy, sustainable ways.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, Karen, that piece is oftentimes missed out on, right? And people come into leadership roles or positions. There's different ways they come into it, right? Some are maybe they've been in training for years and they're primed for the position, ready to go. In other instances, they're kind of pushed into it and they're not fully equipped and they had to learn on the job. So I think, so because of you have those different ways that people get into these leadership roles, the way that they learn how to be a leader isn't always the same.
That's right. And the stakes have always been high. What I'm seeing now is the stakes are even higher. Think about the season we've all been in for the last 18 months.
Yep.
People are burnt out. People are thinking really long and hard about, what is my life about? Where's the meaning, the purpose? Do I want to work for this person? Do I want to work for this company? And how do I take all of that and still put food on the table, pay my mortgage,
right,
take care of what I need to take care of? So we're in this moment of deep collective reflection.
Yes. Yes.
And I believe that the antidote is connection, not in some cliche kind of a way, but in a way that invites ourselves and others to do some deep emotional, spiritual, relational work.
Right, right, right. And that the connection, and actually, my very next question to you is going to be, why is connection so significant? Because I don't know if, much like how we just talked about leadership and how how people viewed leadership, I don't know if people view the significance of connection the same way too in terms of its importance.
So research is showing that we are neurologically wired to connect, and that our neural pathways crave connection.
Right.
So what I talk about in the book is that's not enough to know.
Okay.
We have to be taught how to connect in healthy, sustainable ways, because unfortunately we're wired to connect. So people oftentimes seek out connection in unhealthy ways.
Right.
People connect to people who might not be treating them well.
Right.
People connect to substances, drugs and alcohol, because it's there and it gives them a feeling that at least initially they want more of.
Right.
Until that connection turns into a hellacious disconnection.
Right.
So we have to teach our children, people at work, our team, the community we worship with, go to school with, place. How do we connect? So I think it's really important that we hit the pause button and realize people are looking for connection and purpose. Gotcha. So it's our job to help them find that.
Got you. Out of curiosity, I wanted to care if you can talk about your journey to getting you to this point of recognizing the significance of connection, because I think there's oftentimes our own personal stories sort of feed into the work we do and where we end up. So I'm curious if you could share that a little bit with us.
So it all starts with the personal story, right?
Right.
And I think in order for us to show up the most effective leaders, we have to be able to connect to our personal stories. The whole messy, amazingly beautiful, grief-laden, catastrophe of life.
Right.
And my story starts pretty early on. I will run to all things connection. So grew up in a family where there were lots of family dinners and church going and home cooked meals and conversations around our working class table and in our living room and with my cousins. Connection was really important. And riding shotgun with that were some really pretty painful disconnection pieces.
Okay.
There was intergenerational addiction. There was abuse that goes with addiction. And my mother was diagnosed with a terminal illness when I was 10. And so what that meant for me is that I stepped into a really big adult role at the age of 10, something I wasn't prepared for, that I was not, I mean, who can do that when you're 10?
Right.
And so what I learned, oddly, was this: my worth hinged on my being able to help and heal and rescue. And that's all well and good until it isn't. And it got to be isn't very quickly.
Understood.
And so as I unpacked that in my adult life, I realized that a lot of what I was doing under the guise of connection and helping was not connection for me. No one wants to be saved, right? No one needs somebody to come in with their superhero cape on and say, here I am to save the day. But I was taught that as a child, that was my worth. And so I kept looking for those kinds of scenarios. So the importance of genuine connection became very prominent in my life.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And so what I'm curious about is, what was the trigger to help you sort of realize that and sort of do that reflective look in the rear view mirror and look back and see where it started from you? Was there a trigger for you?
Yeah, there was. I woke up one day thinking, I am sick and tired of being sick and tired. I mean, as we say in the 12-step rooms, you just get to the point where you're like, this is so clearly not working.
Right.
And for me, this was putting everyone's needs before my own.
Yeah.
Not taking care of myself, but making sure everybody else around me was just whistling and kicking up their heels. Right. And it was exhausting and depleting, and I was burning out, and something had to change. So I'm always on a long journey of emotional healing and spiritual well-being and finding guides and really learning to connect really deeply with myself. And when I became a mother, the stakes got even higher.
Sure.
Because I wanted so clearly not to pass on some of the dysfunction to my son. Now, I've made plenty of mistakes. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
That's the process of life. I don't think there's, we can talk about not being perfect, but we don't know what perfect is, because the journey or path that we're all on is different. But I can certainly see, going back to connectedness, because it's a key aspect of what we're talking about here, but I can certainly see where it does feed in and where it does make a difference or impact on the relationships within our lives, both personally and professionally.
One of the 7 strategies I talk about in my book is being accountable. And so accountability drives connection, because if I can come to you and I can say, Audley, I am genuinely sorry for fill in the blank, doing something that hurt you or put you at a disadvantage, and really own that, whether I apologize to a friend or a spouse or my son or someone at work. So accountability drives connection, because when someone's accountable, we learn to trust them.
That's right.
And I can say, whether I'm coaching executives in the workplace or I'm talking to my son, accountability means we close all the escape hatches. There's no blame. There's no shame. I just have to say, I did this.
Yes.
I said this.
Yep. Yep. And what that does, Karen, it sends a message to the other person that this relationship is extremely important, and I need to take responsibility for whatever action or role that I played into getting us to the point where we are now. And it's a really important key when you're talking about the connectedness between relationships with other people.
Well, yes. And the other thing, and I'm sure you know what I mean when I say this, is there's a big difference between saying I'm sorry
Yes.
and being sorry, because I've gotten into the habit of saying to people, your apology without behavioral change is nothing but manipulation. So show it to me. Show me the action, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's just words, right? Let me show me the proof. The proof is in the pudding, as they say, right?
Well, yeah. And now when I apologize to my 19-year-old son, he'll say, show me, Mom.
You've taught him well.
I hope so. In some ways, I hope so.
So you jumped into the strategy. You gave one of them. Let's run through them, and starting with connect consciously as being the first strategy. Let's start there.
Okay, connects consciously. I'm going to run through these really quickly.
Sure.
Connects consciously is all about having a lifestyle that supports the importance of connection. So what is someone doing to learn more about themselves? Do you have people in your life that are going to give you feedback? Do you have time to reflect? Mm-hmm. How are you building a life based on some key practices that you have that supports the importance of connection?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And with that one, the key of that one is that self-reflective, that self-discovery journey that we've all got to go through at some point or another. When we talk, so you entitle your book, empowering your true self, right? How do you do that without doing that? Getting out the shovel and doing some digging and figuring it out.
That's right. I sometimes say I have so much baggage, I need a forklift. I mean, seriously. And it's really important for us to be honest about that, because oddly, we all have things that we need to look at.
Yes. Right. Whether we want to or not, they are there, right?
So, yeah. And I think if we don't look at our stuff, it goes into the basement, works out with weights, and gets stronger.
That's a good analogy. I like that a lot, because it gets stronger and it grows, and it starts to take up a real estate in our lives, and then the longer it goes on, the more it becomes just the way of our life. And so the truth can hit you smack dab in the face, and you're going, no, I've got a whole lifetime that says differently, right?
Yeah, I had a CEO once tell me when I was delivering him feedback that he wasn't really interested in receiving the feedback because he made X amount of money. So how bad could it be? And what I said to him was, you might be leaving money on the table because it could be better if you addressed some of these things. Right. And so we all have that, and it gets stronger. And us human beings are experts at self-deception and elevating denial to a competitive sport.
Yes. I very much like that first strategy, because it's very deliberate, Karen.
Yes.
It's very, very deliberate. It's something that we consciously are doing. It's not an accidental thing that we've stumbled upon. We've recognized, and to get to that point where it's conscious, we within ourselves will say, okay, something needs to change, because until you have that sort of internal dialogue with yourself, it's things are going to stay the way they are.
Yes, they are. It takes a lot of courage. It is not for the faint-hearted to connect consciously. So that's the first strategy.
Yep. So listen deeply is the next one. Let's talk about how important it is to listen.
And you'll learn, and you'll see that they're all connected.
Yep.
You really can't take one seriously without it kind of flowing into the next one. So the whole idea of listens deeply is understanding the power of stillness, of mindfulness, of prayer, whatever works for the person, of tuning into that deep, ancient wisdom, that divine presence that lives within us and surrounds us.
Yes.
And I know you're familiar with the research, mindfulness, meditation. It's all having tremendous impact positively on how we show up,
right,
on how we respond instead of react, on how we can focus and be productive. It's a game changer. So the ability to listen deeply first to ourselves also impacts our ability to show up and listen to each other.
Yeah, and the focus, the piece around focus is so critical, all this, because we all know there's lots of distractions and things pulling our attention from what we want to do. And I even myself, I'll sit down and say, I want to do this specific task. And I find sometimes I get challenged because if it's not something on my phone going off or one of the children or something, it's my own thoughts. So it's like there's sort of an internal, my thoughts keeping those in check as well as what's happening on the external as well. It's a focus one. It's a tough one for people.
It is, but it also helps us to embrace slowing down and stopping our efforts to hustle for approval. Right? I mean, if we can just focus on, I am enough. I might want to be growing. There are some things I need to change, but I'm worthy. And that whole listening deeply can really help with that.
Right. And again, just if you really stop and think about it, if you're building a connection, how will you garner information or gain insights if you're not prepared to listen first to ourselves, as you said, and then to the people around us? So
listening is really a hard thing because we want to jump in and we want to say our piece and show what we know and control the conversation.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. So as you sort of talk about the strategies that flow into one another, exhibiting empathy is very much tied into listening deeply, because this is what you're demonstrating empathy to other people, but you can't do that if you're not listening.
You can't do that if you're not listening, and you cannot truly do it if you haven't learned to show yourself empathy. And that's where I think a lot of people struggle the most. We might not even be aware of the constant voices that are telling us we're not enough or beating ourselves up. So as with all the connection strategies, they have to begin with ourselves. And empathy is a game changer. It's different than compassion. I always like to say that compassion is empathy in action.
Yes.
And it's completely different from sympathy. Sympathy is kind of this drippy, oh, I feel sorry for you. But empathy flows from a core inside of us that signals the world, I'm okay with my feelings.
Right.
I'm okay with the mistakes I've made. I can show myself empathy. I can show myself compassion. And then as a result, I can genuinely show it to you.
Right.
The night my husband died, he died 6 months ago. I had 2 friends show up with such empathy because they practice empathy with themselves every day. They weren't there to cheer me up, to make it all better. They were there to just be present. And they were able to do that for us because they had done the work to be there for themselves. Right?
Yeah, that's a sort of powerful illustration, because it's really easy. And then in your situation where someone will come and go, oh my gosh, let me come fix it. Let me fix it. Let me do, let me change it. Let me make you feel better. Let me do all these things. And there's such great value and power in accepting the moment for what it is, right? Understanding what's happening. So in your situation, there's been great loss, allowing yourself to feel those emotions as opposed to pushing them away and acting like they weren't there, or rushing through them because they feel bad that you feel bad, so we gotta hurry up and make you feel good, right? Like the giving some time is really what we're needing to do.
and just sitting with the mess, the grief,
Yeah.
the tension, whatever it is. But so hard to do that for somebody else if in fact you can't do it for yourself.
And you know, we sometimes are our own worst enemies, because we beat ourselves up pretty good when we're ready to, and we don't give ourselves opportunities. We don't always give ourselves credit. We don't always look at the strengths that we have within us and how do you elevate those things. And much as you sort of talk with strategies thus far, we've got to do it for ourselves first. The empathy is again another big one of those that we got to do for ourselves.
And research is now showing, in fact, a lot of it, that empathy positively impacts the bottom line in businesses. And what I say to the leaders I work with all the time is, look, empathy doesn't mean anything goes.
Right.
Empathy doesn't mean that we don't have standards.
Right.
So that when our person does not show up to a meeting or meet a deadline, it doesn't mean we say, oh, I understand, everything's okay.
Right.
Boundaries have to ride shotgun with empathy. Otherwise, we can become empathy-holics, right? And we have to still have people understand there are guardrails.
Sure.
I can feel with you and understand what you're going through, and also encourage you to grow.
Right. And through that connection process, you can build that understanding to understand the guardrails. And so within the context of leadership, right, that's where some of the leaders' work is to understand the guardrails, understand the boundaries, understand our the limits that exist. And then, once that's been made clear, okay, so now we know what how far we can go. Let's see how, let's shift those parameters and go, to the lengths as far as we possibly can go. And so that's where the leader comes in and the work that they've got to do.
Yeah, without a doubt, because most people are not going to show up with their true, best, vulnerable, authentic self if they don't feel like this is a safe place. So it has to start with empathy. But think about it with parents. If all we ever did was feel for our kids and feel like we have to rescue them and make it better for them, we would be doing them a huge disservice, right?
Got you. No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. The next strategy, which I was going to say, it makes you smile a lot, but I'm always smiling, but celebrating curiosity, it made me feel good, because it's just, I think curiosity is a wonderful thing. I mean, this podcast exists out of curiosity because I get to ask questions and get to be inquisitive and get to gain insights and garner knowledge and all these sorts of things. But this is also, as you've pointed out, a very strong connection piece.
It is. And it's very connected to empathy. We have to understand how to ask questions that help people open up. So, I often make the distinction between, okay, there are questions that are litigator questions. That makes up.
Where were you on the night of right?
Right. Yes. And those are the questions that make you feel like, oh my gosh, am I on the witness stand? I'm pushed back on my heels. I don't even know what to say to this.
Right.
And then there are questions asked with a certain tone, certain words that help people really open up and help them understand it's okay if you don't know the answer. We're here to do this together.
Right.
I really just want to know what you are thinking and feeling.
Yeah. And look, and people like when you take a general interest in them. They just but a real interest, not doing it because or a manipulation thing, but truly, I want to know. I'm truly inquisitive. I'm truly curious. I'd like to understand better. That opens up the way, especially from a trust building standpoint.
Oh, without a doubt. And it has a lot of benefits from a business metric perspective. I mean, curiosity helps with innovation. It helps with productivity, especially if it's linked with humility. Oftentimes, one of the best things senior leaders can do is say, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. That lowers the guard, right? That brings everyone down to the same level. I don't have the answer. Let's figure it out together. What is your input to this or something?
Yeah, curiosity, especially when it rides shotgun with empathy, can be a real game changer.
Agreed. Navigating chaos completely. I think that's, or comfortably rather. Nobody likes chaos, and nobody likes to do it comfortably either. But sort of talk about that one, because I think a lot of people will connect with that one right away and go, yeah, we know about chaos and trying to navigate it.
Yeah, and I like to say it's all chaos. I mean, right now we're sitting here and things seem pretty peaceful, but knowing how life can work, it only can take a blink of an eye for the whole playing field to change.
Sure.
So there's two things about navigating chaos comfortably, and I think this is a key component for leaders and certainly for building healthy connections.
Okay.
We're not in control of much.
Okay. Fair enough.
Right? What we're in control of is pretty much our response to what's going on around us.
Exactly.
If we can communicate that through our behaviors, if we can have practices that ground us in meaningful, purposeful spirituality, we are more apt to show up to the crazy, chaotic times in our life, the stressful, overwhelming times.
Right.
With a sense of, okay, even in the most egregious times, I can show up with a peaceful heart. And people want to know that as the chaos is coming in, that we'll be okay, and that someone knows what to do to keep us feeling hopeful.
Right.
Not positive toxic positivity, because this toxic positivity is really gaining hold in our culture. Like, just think positively. Well, I don't, what?
That's right.
Because that undermines our deep connection to ourselves. I'm allowed to be upset. I'm allowed to be grieving. I'm allowed to be stressed. It all is helpful, though, if I can express those in healthy ways. So a leader's job when the chaos hits is to communicate hope in a realistic sense and to show people, I know the way through this.
Right.
We can do this.
Yep. And Karen, what that does, it inspires so much confidence. People are looking around and things are going wild and chaotic, and and not to say that we're not acknowledging what's happening. We're not acknowledging. Yes, there's a storm outside. Yes, there's lots of things happening, and we're going to weather that storm. We're doing it in a calm, reassuring manner. I think really is the key to this.
Yeah.
Right.
And I love those words that you used. Realistic, right? Realistic. We're not going to pretend it's not happening.
Right.
We're not going to put lipstick on a pig. We're just going to say, okay, this is happening. Let's not go to denial, and let's not go to toxic positivity. Let's stay present and figure out together that we can do this.
Yeah. I love the term toxic positivity, because it is so true. We can scream and scream, you should be happy or be positive, or all the things that we talk about that we should be doing. And what that does simply is ignore what's really happening, right? So it's ignore what you're going through, but be this instead. And that isn't any closer to getting us to where we need to be. It's just living in denial, right?
Well, and that's what fuels some mental health challenges, and that contributes to people feeling traumatized.
Yes,
and it fuels addiction, we're seeing huge upticks in all of this in our culture. And so I want people to stay as present as they can to the truth of what's going on
Yes.
in their lives.
Yes, yes, yes. And that's where we look at something like social media as an example where it's got all sorts of benefits and positives, but it also gives us an opportunity to portray or even see things that, maybe we're lacking and we look to and go, oh, I wish I had that, or oh, so and so has this life, or so and so is so happy. And that may not even be close to reality.
Right. And this feeling of competition steals our joy, right? It
Yes,
just
yes.
steals our joy. And what we're learning now, because some of it is in the media, is social media has indeed contributed in some ways to the uptick we're seeing in anxiety and eating disorders and depression and addiction. And it also tells me people are starving for connection.
Yes, 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 yes. So it's not enough just to scroll through my feed and go, oh, it's not enough. And it's funny, I've caught myself on a few occasions where I'll see someone who maybe I'll see them, in person, because we're now allowed to see people in person. I'll see someone in person and go, oh, I've been keeping up with you because I've seen what you've been sharing on social media. But that's not a real connection, right? That's like kind of like reading the headlines, if you will, but that's not truly me being connected to that individual.
So here's a story. I knew of somebody who had just gone through a terrible death in their family.
Yep.
And she mentioned her process to another family member and said, wow, I really didn't even hear from you during that time.
Right.
And the response was, well, I liked all your posts.
Getting further and further away from reality, Karen.
Right. Yeah. And so very sad. If somebody thinks that's showing up for somebody while you're grieving, what are some of us coming to? Right. So it's just a wake-up call.
Yeah.
Liking somebody posts are not the same as showing up for them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The connectedness piece, that's not connectedness, if you will. That's not connectedness. The last strategy, walks with confidence. Another good one. And I think, again, people will find some true value. Let's talk about that, Karen.
So the confidence that I talk about, oddly, is different than the confidence that we're used to thinking about. So the confidence that we're used to thinking about is confidence that comes from having a skill, having an area of expertise, an athletic trait, something we do really well.
Yep.
Okay. The kind of confidence I'm talking about that drives connection is courage-based confidence. It's the confidence that comes from understanding I've gone through some pretty tough times and I've learned a lot. I'm now comfortable in my skin. Yes. I have resilience. I understand I'm embarking and experiencing my own hero's journey. I trust myself.
Yes. Yes.
And that courage-based confidence is very different from the confidence that comes from, I'm really good at what I've trained to be good at.
Right. One's external and one's internal. It comes from within.
Yes.
That's the difference.
Yes. And where I come from in the book, all connection that makes a difference starts with the inside job. So leadership is an inside job. Relationships is an inside job. The best thing that I can do for the intimates in my life, the best thing that we all can do, whether it be for a spouse or our children or a dear friend of ours or a sibling, is to do my own work on myself, right?
Absolutely. As you talk, as we're talking here, certainly, and I definitely know you referenced in your book that the things that we're talking about here aren't exclusive to those holding leadership roles. You don't have to be a manager, boss, CEO to connect in the manners that we've been talking about, and that any one of us can do it in any aspect of our lives.
Absolutely. If we go back to what we started talking about, leadership is the ability to help other people soar. And so we do that at PTA meetings,
yes,
or in the huddle, or in the places of worship that we go to. We do it in the den and the kitchen,
yes.
Right? Those are really important. I want people to think, wow, I am in a leadership role.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. You know, this conversation is so fitting for this podcast because we spend so much time talking about the importance of living this audacious life and the things that we can do. But a lot of the times before we can live this bold, audacious life that we encourage people to, a lot of the inside work, building our resiliency, building our own confidence, listening to ourselves, the empathy. I think all of the 7 strategies that you identified, they all fit into the framework of living a bold, audacious life.
Yeah, I think there's a huge connection between connection and living this audacious life that you talk about, because in order to step out from what we know, to jump off that cliff, so to speak, we have to be able to believe that there's something worth risking everything for on the other side. And to have that confidence inside of ourselves and people cheering us on. Audacious lives, last I looked, don't usually happen in isolation.
Not at all.
Right?
Not at all. You're absolutely right. And something I've said many times, you sort of touched on it, about where the greatness lies. The greatness lies on the other side of adversity. So if you can outlast adversity and like I oftentimes use the analogy, there's a big boulder in our pathway, and our job is to get up, over, around, through, however we do it, but we need to get to the other side, because that's where all the great stuff lies.
It really does, but it can sometimes feel like we're Sisyphus. Like all we're doing is pushing up that boulder. Like, when in the world will this boulder pushing stop?
Yeah.
And that's why it's really important to have a spiritual grounding, an ability to listen to ourselves, so that we can feel confident that this too will pass.
Yes.
And life is really messy and hard at times. But part of it is that I get to tell my story in a way that hopefully what I'm going through can help somebody else.
Yes. Well, and that's a really important point, because oftentimes, we don't recognize, other people, what they may be going through. And when they see that, Karen faced this and she got by it, maybe I can too. Like, we can inspire people just by our own actions. And maybe we're not consciously looking to try to do it, but we can. And that's really important. And that's why I'm such a big proponent of sharing our stories, like sharing your victories, sharing our journeys, because it can inspire other people in profound ways.
It can. And to be able to show up fully human.
Yeah.
And not everybody earns the right to hear every detail of our story, right? So I believe very powerfully in the power of discernment.
Yes.
And yet there are still some parts of our stories that we can share generally in public that helps people feel like, oh, wow, there is hope. I too can. C.S. Lewis said one of the most profound things about friendship. He said, friendship is the ability to say, oh, wow, you too? I thought I was the only one.
Wow. Yeah. There's power in that. There absolutely. Okay. And I've so enjoyed the chat here, and so enjoyed So I'm so wonderful. So wonderful that we connected, and I should say, I thought you did a phenomenal job with the book. Very thought provoking. I think you presented the strategy you presented, forced you to look at them in a different way, and I think that's important. And so if you can walk away with a different perspective on something that, especially something you thought you already maybe knew or understand, and seeing it a different way, I think you've done a great job in that regard. So thank you for that. Thank you for being here on the Audacious Living podcast. And maybe for our listeners, we can let them know where they, the book isn't out yet, but it's coming out soon. So maybe let our listeners know where they can go, or maybe learn more about you and the work that you do.
So everything is on my website, KarenJHardwick.com. There's content there and blogs, information about the book. People can pre-order the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all their retailers, because it is available now. It comes out November 23rd. Instagram, I'm Karen J. Hardwick. So plenty of places to find me. And this was delightful. Thank you so much for having me, for reading the book, and for talking about connection. I really enjoyed our time.
I did as well, and I say there's no pun intended, but I truly appreciated connecting with you today. And thank you so much, Karen. All the best, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Audley.
Back we are here on the podcast, and I really appreciate Karen for being here and enlightening us on the importance of being connected, not only just as leaders, but in everyday lives, and really the significance and importance of why staying connected and how they can maintain a long-lasting bond that can endure just about anything. So again, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciated hearing your connection strategies. Karen left us with so much to think about, but if there's just one thing that I take from my conversation with her, it would be this. When it comes to building and sustaining lasting relationships, one of the most important tools that we have at our disposal is connectedness. Leaders who can successfully use this will undoubtedly find success in their work, their organization, their personal and professional lives. Those who can't will have to work that much harder at achieving positive results. Now, the good news is that connecting isn't a skill, it's not an innate talent that you're born with. As with most things, connection can be developed and learned with practice. Once implemented into our regular ways of operating, connection can lead to improved communication, a more productive team, increased influence, and a much more audacious organization. Hey, listen, if you haven't registered for email notifications of the podcast, please know that you can do so simply by heading over to bestaudaciouslife.com. All you've got to do is enter in your email address, and you'll be alerted every time we've got brand new content that comes out. I'd encourage, as always, our listeners. First off, I want to say thank you, because the support that you've given this podcast is fantastic. Thank you, as always, the audaciousness of our listeners. So many lovers of audaciousness. The support's been tremendous, and it's ongoing, and I really, really appreciate that. We've come to the end of another episode, and as I like to say every time we close out, is until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.